Animations are really fun and will take your website to the next level, but writing these animations in CSS can be really time consuming and difficult. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to use the GSAP JavaScript library to write complex animations incredibly easily. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name's Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Now to get started, I have the finished version of our product on the right, and if I just refresh the page, you're going to see our really simple animation where our header drops in, we have our sidebars sliding in, our footer pops up, and the reverse button spins in. And when I click reverse, the entire animation reverses itself at a quicker speed. So doing this in CSS would be incredibly difficult with all of the timings, and it would be very fragile. But using the GSAP library, I'm going to show you how to make this and make it really simply. So to get started, we're first going to need to create that index.html file that's going to contain all of this code. So let's just refresh so we can see it. We have this header, our sidebars, the footer, and then the reverse button. So to get started, hit !tab. That'll give you all this boilerplate. And then now here inside of the body, we need to have our header. So we'll just create a div with the class of header. We're going to need our middle section, which is our content. I'm going to create a div for that. And then we're going to need our footer, just like that. And inside of our header, we're going to have some links. So we'll put this in this div called the links. And we're going to create 3 different links, each one with a class of link. We'll just say link 1, copy this down, link 2, and link 3. Then inside of our content, we need this green sidebar here on the left and the right. So let's create a sidebar for the left. We'll give it a class of sidebar and left. Same exact thing, but sidebar and right for our right sidebar. And then we'll just have a button in here with the class of button that says reverse. Now if I open this up with live server so we can see it on the right, and this is just a Visual Studio Code extension, you can see we have our links and our reverse button, but obviously none of our content or header or anything has any styles to it, which is why it's not showing up in this color. So let's add some styles. And since these styles are really basic, I'm just going to put them in the head here. These styles are mostly just so you can see things while we're doing our animation, so that way we have something visual to look at. The first thing I want to do is style our body so we can have this nice split where the header's at the top and the footer is at the bottom. So we can say our body here is going to have a margin of 0, a height of 100 view height. That's just going to make it fill the entire screen. We're going to change this to be display flex, and we want our flex direction to be column. That way everything stacks vertically on top of each other. Then what we can do is select our content section and set the flex grow to be equal to 1. And that's essentially going to make this middle section grow to fill all of our space, and the header and footer are going to be pushed to the top and the bottom. And speaking of the header, let's come in here and style this to have a height, which is going to be 15% of the height of the entire page. So it's always going to be 15%. And we'll give it that background color of red. Now if we save and come over here, you can see we have our header with that proper background color. We can also style our links by selecting links here. And what we want to do is change this to be display of flex. And we want to justify our content with space around. And then lastly, align these items in the center. And what that's going to do is force our links to be spaced out from each other evenly, as you can see. And then if we give these links a height of 100%, and in combination with our line item center, that's going to put our links dead center inside of that header section. And we can just change the color to white so it's easier to see them. And that's our links completely done, and also our header completely done. Next, let's work on our footer. Since it's going to be almost identical to our header, we're going to give it the exact same height, but instead of red, we'll just make this blue. Now if we save, you can see our footer has showed up down here at the very bottom. And then lastly, we have our sidebar sections. So we can say sidebar, and these sidebars are going to be set up in a way that they're displayed left and right. And to do that, we can take our content and change the display here to flex and the justify content to space between. And what that's going to do is it's going to push our left sidebar to the left, our right sidebar to the right, and a reverse button in the middle. And if you save, you see our reverse button is now in the middle. But to make it so our reverse button isn't as tall as it is, we can just select that button and give it an align self of center. And that's just going to make it centered instead of stretching the full height. And then with our sidebar, we could just change here the background color to be green, and we want the width here to be 15% of the view width. And if we save, you can see our sidebars have also appeared. Now with that done, we have all of the basic code that we need for styling all of the elements on our page, and the next thing to work on is going to be the JavaScript for our project. So we can create a script.js file. This is going to be where we put our JavaScript, and we want to make sure that we import that script tag up here, which is going to be script.js, and we're going to defer this so it loads after our HTML. Next, we're going to want to install the GreenSock library. To do that, we can just come to this GreenSock URL here. I'll put it down in the description below, but if you just type in GreenSock install, you'll come right to here. You want to make sure you select CDN, and we don't need any of these extra plugins, so we're just going to copy this one script tag right here. So we can just click copy code, and we can come in here and make sure we paste it directly above our other script tag. And again, make sure we defer this so it loads after the elements inside of our body down here load. So now we have GSAP installed, and we have our script tag, which is going to have access to GSAP since it's after our GSAP script. So now inside of our script here, we can start animating things with GSAP. So the easiest way to get started with animating is just to use the GSAP property here, and we can say .to, for example, or .from, and this is going to allow us to animate to a certain state or from a certain state. And since right now all of our elements are already in their final to destination, let's use an animation of from. So we can say we want to animate from a particular state to a new state. So we're animating from whatever state we pass in here to our finished state we see here. And let's start by animating just our header first. And with GSAP, it's really nice because we can just pass in a selector, for example, .header, and it's going to select every element that has the .header class. So this works very similar to query selector all if you're familiar with that. It uses the exact same logic behind the scenes. So now what we can do is we can just pass in some properties here for how we want the animation to occur. We can pass in a duration, which in our case will say we want it to take 1 second for the entire animation to finish. And we can also pass in how we want the animation to work. So for example, let's say we want to change the Y position of this to start at the very top of our page and then scroll down. We can say our Y is going to be equal to -100%. That's just going to move our Y position upwards 100% of its whole height. So essentially, it's going to start right off our page and then animate in. And if we save this, you can see that it now animates from the top all the way down with a duration of 1 second. We can take this even a step further though and make it look a little bit cooler by using an easing function. And luckily for us, this GSAP library actually has a ton of easings already built in. If we just click on eases here, you can see this nice easing visualizer, and you can see exactly what's going to happen and the easing curve. So for example, if we click on bounce, we can see that we get this nice ease function here. So let's actually modify here our header to have an ease of bounce. Now if we save, you can see the header comes in and it kind of does that nice little bounce animation, which I think looks quite good and gives it a more fun feel to it, which is really important when you're building out animations. You want to give your site character. So we're giving our header some extra character by giving it a nice fun looking bounce animation. Now the next thing that we want to work on is going to be animating our links so that they actually fade into the page instead of appearing on the page to begin with. So we can do another gsap.from. This time we want to do it for our links. So we're going to say .link because that's our selector for each one of our links. And we're going to again give it a duration here, which is going to be 1 second. And we're going to set the opacity to 0. So we're coming from an opacity of 0 over the course of 1 second. And if we save, you're going to notice something interesting. As you can see, the links actually fade in at the same time that the header is dropping down. If we increase the duration here, it's a little easier to see. You can see that they're fading in already as the header is dropping down. In order to prevent this, we need to use a delay property. And what this is going to do is allow us to start our animation after a set period of time. So we can say delay 1. So this duration is 1, and then we use a delay of 1 second. So this link animation will start 1 second after, which is the exact time that our header animation finishes. So now if we save, you can see the links don't start fading in until our header is completely finished. But you'll also notice all of our links fade in at the exact same time. If I rerun this, you'll see all of them come in at the same time. To prevent this, we can use a property called stagger, which will allow us to put a delay between each one of the elements that's selected by .link. So we can say we want to have a 0.5 second delay. Now when we save, you can see our first link comes in, and then half a second later the next, and then the next. So that allows us to essentially stagger out our different animations so that each link comes in one after the other instead of all coming in at the exact same time. This stagger property is really useful. Now the next thing to work on is going to be our sidebars. I'm going to start with our right sidebar only, so we can say .right, which is the class we gave to our right sidebar. We're going to give this one a duration of, let's say 2 seconds. We want it to be a little bit slower. And in this, what I want to do is make it fly in from the left side of our screen all the way to the right. So we can come in here and set our X property equal to -100 VW. And that's going to make it fly in from the left side of our screen. And if we save, you can see it flies in from the left side of the screen. But it also starts at the very beginning, right when our page loads. So let's put in a little bit of a delay here. I want this to animate right after our header finishes. So we can put in a delay of 1. And also for this, let's change our easing function. We're going to use power.in. We're going to use power2 for this one. So if we save this, you can see that we get our animation occurring and it slides in and kind of speeds up at the end. And that's what this power2 is doing. If we use power2 of in, you can see that it starts out slow and then it speeds up towards the end, which is exactly what we wanted for this sidebar on the right side here. Now the next thing to work on is going to be our left sidebar. And when we get this animated in, it'll make our right sidebar look even better. So we can say GSAP.from. We want to do for our left sidebar this time. And our left sidebar is again going to have the same exact duration of 1, which pretty much everything else on our page has. But I want it to start animating before our right animation finishes. So we can instead use a delay here of instead of 1, so it'll start right when our other animation begins, I want it to start about halfway through this other animation. So I'm going to use a delay here of 2. What this is going to do is it's going to wait 2 seconds, which means it'll be 1 second into our right animation before it actually starts. That way they're both animating at the same time. And for this, we're just going to set the X equal to -100%, so it's just off the edge of the screen. Now if we save, you'll notice something's not quite right. You can see it's not animating, and that's because my selector here should be .left. I forgot the period. And now if I save, you can see our right sidebar animates in and our left sidebar animates in also at the exact same time. Let's watch that again real quick. So you can see the right side comes in slowly and then the left side. And let's actually speed up this left side, or the right side, sorry. It's a little bit too slow, so we'll change that to a duration of 1 and this to a delay of 0.5. So again, I'm sorry, 1.5. That way it comes in halfway through this right animation. Now if we save, you can see it comes in, and then this also comes in about a half a second later, which looks really good. Now the next thing to work on animating is going to be our footer. So we can just say gsap.from. And for this footer, instead of using from, we're actually going to use to, just so I can demonstrate the different ways you can work with GSAP. And what to does is it says, I want you to go to a particular position, and then it's going to start from wherever the base values are inside of our CSS here. So what we want to do is for our footer, which is .footer, we want it to go to a particular location with a duration, again, of 1 second. That's kind of the default we've been using for everything. And I want it to go to a Y of 0. And for easing, we're just going to use elastic since it'll look kind of fun. And you're going to notice if we save this, the footer doesn't do anything. And that's because it's already in the to position. So what we need to do inside of our HTML here with our CSS is change our position here to have a transform, translate. We're going to translate in the Y direction, -100%. Actually, this will be 100%, I believe, so it appears off the screen. And now if we go back into our script here and set up a proper delay, which in our case is going to be a delay of 2.5, so it occurs right after our left animation is done, and we save, you can see it's off of the screen, and then it's going to animate into the screen with that really cool elastic animation. But you'll notice, if we save that again, we have this annoying scroll bar on the right. We obviously don't want this, so inside of our body, let's just change this to overflow hidden. That'll remove the scroll bar because it'll just hide everything off the edge of the page. So there we go, that's all the animations for that. And the last thing left is this reverse button. So we can say gsap dot, and here I'm going to again demonstrate the from to version of writing out the code for GSAP. And this allows you to specify both the from value and the to value, so you don't have to worry about any default styles in your CSS. So here we want to select our dot button, just like that. And here for our styles, first we specify our from. So we're going to have an opacity, which is going to be 0. We want it to fade in. We're also going to have a scale, which is going to be 0. And then finally, we're going to have a rotation. And this rotation is going to be 720. So it's going to start out rotated, and then we're going to unrotate it back out. So in the 2, where we want to end up at, we're going to put an opacity of 1, a scale of 1, and a rotation, which is going to be here equal to 0. Whoops. And we want to make sure we set up our duration and delay inside of our 2 section. So our duration is going to be 1, and delay, we want this to occur after our footer is done, so we'll say 3.5. Now if we save, everything should properly animate in. And there we go, we have a reverse button spinning in. But something really interesting you'll notice is that we have scale set to 1 here, but there's no CSS scale property. There's no CSS rotation property. These are actually inside of a transform. And GSAP is smart enough to understand that scale needs to be wrapped inside of a transform, and rotation wraps itself inside of the rotate transform. So GSAP does a lot of that interpolation for you. Same thing with X and Y. This is actually wrapping this inside of a translate X and a translate Y. So GSAP is doing a lot of that work behind the scenes for you, which is really important. Also, GSAP works on other things than just HTML elements. For example, we can say GSAP and we want to go to, and we can pass in just a normal JavaScript object. So let's say const object, it's going to be equal to x of 0. And we want to take this object and we want to go to an x of 100. Then we can use this onUpdate function, which will just get called every single time we update. And inside this function, let's say that we want to just console.log out our object.x. And we want to make sure we put this inside of this object here, just like that. Now, if I inspect the page, drag over our console here so that we can see this, and I refresh, you're going to notice we have being printed out all the values from 0 to 100 because it's animating over that property over the course of our duration, which we could specify if we want. For example, let's do 2 seconds, so it's kind of a slower animation, so we can really see it being printed out here. And you can see it goes all the way from 0 to 100 and animates that object's property. So we can use this with CSS elements, objects, and other things. It's like SVGs, for example. It's really powerful in that regard. Also, something that's really important is you'll notice that we have a lot of really messy code. We have this duration repeated everywhere. We have all of these different delays, which kind of compound on each other. So if I wanted to, for example, change the animation of my header to now be, let's say, 3 seconds, everything else is going to break because you're going to notice our links start fading in too early. Everything else starts coming in too early. It's just all coming in earlier than it should. So in order to get around this issue, we can actually use something called a timeline. And that also makes it so our reverse button is dead easy to implement. So let's put that back to 1 so everything works. And let's create our first timeline. So we can just come in here. Timeline is going to be equal to gsap.timeline. And what a timeline allows us to do is essentially combine together a bunch of different animations that all occur one after another. That way, if you change the duration of the first animation, all the other animations are going to stagger themselves properly after that animation. So we can just say, for example, timeline, and this timeline has our from, to, and from to properties. So we can say timeline from for our dot header. And what we want to do is let's just copy this exactly like this into here. So now we have our normal header animation with our duration, our Y, and our easing. And if we just comment out all of this up here, we should see our animation for our header work just as before. And if we save, you see our header works just like it did before. But you'll notice, as I said, our duration is duplicated everywhere. We can actually set in here some defaults. And let's say our default for duration is going to be 1. Now we can remove this duration here, and every value that we specify for our timeline is going to have that default duration of 1 that we set here. And if I just save that, you can see it still works just as before. And another great thing about timeline is we can actually chain all of these methods together. So we could just add another dot from onto the end here, and it's all going to work. Instead of having to say timeline.from every time, we can just continually chain them one after another. Now let's just copy the code for our link here. Paste that in so we have our link. We can get rid of this duration, but everything else is going to be the same. Let's save, and you can see that our link worked just as before. But something interesting to note is we don't need this delay anymore because this delay is adding additional delay that we don't actually want. If we remove this, you can see the links will always start as soon as our header animation finishes. Even if we change this to a duration of 3, you can see that our links are going to wait all the way until those 3 seconds are done, and then they start animating in. So that is something really nice about timeline, is that everything is one after another. So let's bring in our right here. Let's just copy this code down, paste it here for our right, remove our duration, remove our delay, And if we save, you can see our header animates in, our links animate in, but then our right animates in, and we don't want to wait for our link animation to finish. This is something that, if you remember from before, we wanted our right side animation to start as soon as the header finished and not after the links. So luckily, this .from property takes a second value, and this value is going to be the delay that we want to have. This can either be a relative delay or it can be an absolute delay. So an absolute delay would be the delay from when the timeline starts, and a relative delay would be a delay from when the last animation finished. In our case, we want to do an absolute delay, which is just going to be a 1 duration, since we want it to start right after our header. Now if we save, you can see as soon as our header finishes, our right side starts animating in, and it doesn't actually wait for the links to finish. Now let's do a similar thing for our left side animation. We'll copy this in, we can remove our duration and our delay, but we need to reinstate our delay to say that we want this to start half a second after this right side animation starts. And to do that is actually really straightforward inside of GSAP. If we use the left caret here, this is saying our previous animation, this is referencing when the previous animation starts, so right when our right animation starts. So if we actually save this, the left and right are going to both start at the exact same time. But if we add in a delay here of 0.5, this is saying start 0.5 seconds after this right animation starts. So now if we save, you can see that our right comes in and then our left comes in half a second later. So that allows us to do that nice offset based on a previous animation, which is really important. Next, we're going to copy in our footer section. And as you can see, we can use 2 just fine with our timeline. Get rid of this duration here. We don't need our delay either, so we can get rid of our delay. And if we save, our footer should come in after our left and right animation finish, just like that, as you can see. And then lastly, we're going to have our button here. So let's copy this down. And our button no longer is going to need to have a delay or duration. So let's just remove that. And we're left with just the opacity, scale, and the rotation. And if we save, we should see everything animate just as it did before, but it's set up in this nice and easy to use timeline so that we don't have to worry about complex delays or offsets, and that way we can change the duration of something in our animation and it won't affect anything else in the animation. Also, as I mentioned with timelines, it's dead simple to reverse a timeline. Let's just set up a selector for our button here. We can say document.query selector or .button. And we can just say button.add event listener on click. And whenever we click this button, we want to reverse our animation. So we can just say timeline.reverse. It is that simple. So now our animation is going to come in, everything is going to run as it did before. And now when we click reverse, everything is going to run in the exact reverse direction. And if we want to speed up this reverse, we can just say timeline.timescale. Set that to 3, for example. This is going to be 3 times faster than our normal animation speed. And if we click reverse, you'll see everything reverses out at 3 times the speed that it came in. And that's all it takes to create animations in JavaScript. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my other videos linked over here and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.